Okay, so a good evening to all of you. Sorry for being a few minutes late, 3 minutes late, but I was just making sure I'm getting the technicals in place. And once those are in place, we can run. I see Jolway has already posted a comment. Let me read his comment for the sake of being the first one to post it way before we're even talking about it. It says, speaking of rituals, have you noticed how Hollywood plays these rituals for entertainment, like Eyes Wide Shut? In fact, I'll tell you, Jolway, and everybody else is going to be joining us later, that Hollywood is the #1 predictive programming platform used by the establishment to plant ideas and speak out in plain sight. We call it hiding in plain sight. It is the principle straight out of the Occultist Manual Handbook, and it's about deflecting the karmic debt that comes with doing certain things. So if you're going to do certain things and you want to avoid that, then you have to declare, you have to make an announcement of what you intend to do, so that then from a spiritual law standpoint, you're no longer in the karmic debt of that particular deed. In fact, this is common everywhere, even within the confines of Yahweh himself. Remember, Yahweh, God, El Elyon Adonai, is the most high God and creator of all these things, including all the spiritual laws we hear about. And the reason that is so is because these laws and everything about them is what dictate and determines what goes on. So he also deflects karmic debt by prophecy. There you go. So he will announce directly and let people know that this is what's coming, and then people get to be aware. Oh, I see, and that's how it works. But it's very, very interesting indeed. And so now I'm going to be changing my format because I get confused. Some days I'll do this portrait format, some days I do the landscape format, and I just get lost with which one is better than the others. But I think let me stick with this one, because then when I do those little shorts, they look neat, because when I do the little clips, then they work. So guys, welcome to the Epstein files presentation, episode number 4. I'm very, very excited. I know others will be joining us later. Just make sure you let everybody know. Just send those notifications out there. Tag somebody in the comments, whatever it is, and then there are those who catch the recordings. I now transmit this both on YouTube, as always speaking is following from there, as well as on Facebook. The advantage with YouTube is it don't delete videos, so you'll be able to follow those. I've now created a playlist around this, which should be able to help you immensely later when you want to watch and binge through all these things. The disclaimer, as always, let me read that out real quick. We have so much to cover, so I'm going to rush this. So in presenting materials such as the Epstein files and the Satanic Awareness Manual, I recognize the need for both historical caution and theological clarity. The Epstein documents expose undeniable realities of abuse and exploitation, while the Awareness Manual reflects the culture climate of the early 1990s satanic panic, a period marked by widespread fear, exaggerated claims, and investigations into alleged occult crimes. And many of these claims have since been challenged or dismissed by secular scholars who found little evidence of organized large-scale satanic conspiracies, which is what basically a report like this one, the Epstein files, and some of the stuff they dumped in there would cause many to think. Anyway, yet as a preacher and theologian, I affirm the biblical truth of Satan's existence and his devices. Scripture warns us of his works, necromancy, sorcery, sex magic, and other occult practices that continue to manifest in various forms, regardless of scholarly skepticism. So while society may dismiss these realities as superstition or moral panic, the Word of God compels us to remain vigilant against the adversary's schemes. So, therefore, this discussion, which I will be now running with, which I've been running with all this time, hinges on 2 guiding principles. Number 1, historical awareness, which is the understanding that some documents and manuals emerge from cultural fear and may not always reflect objective evidence. I cannot stop to say that, because that's true. Even when you come to what's going on here in Africa with all the craziness that we see, there's a lot of stuff that's just not genuine. A lot of stuff that's just not real. A lot of it which is just fake. So that bit cannot be ignored. Yet, from a theological conviction, which is the second principle, I affirm that beyond academic debate, Satan's influence is real, his devices are destructive, and the church must discern and resist them. And guys, I will be going into some really deep waters with this series. I'm not kidding you. In fact, there's a section where I'll just have to now bring in pictures to show you some of the stuff we'll be looking at. Really, really deep stuff. So for the sake of that, that's why I do these disclaimers. So I will paste them. I do say that and I forget. I'll try and paste them anyway. So now let's look at the topic we just came out of. We came out of the timelines. We looked at Jeffrey Epstein's timeline, Ghislaine Maxwell's timeline, and of course the Epstein files themselves, along with many other things around that. And here are the key insights I want us to pick from that before we go into the next stage. The files that we saw, the Epstein files that we're seeing now that are still being dumped, show a layered record. We've got flight logs, in other words, who traveled with Epstein. We've got emails and social contacts, who corresponded or met socially. So he did meet quite a bit because he was a socialite. Victim allegations. So we've got direct testimony naming individuals. Ghislaine Maxwell's own case, Epstein's own case, these file dumps. All these things speak to the many things we just came from speaking about. And then also the FBI tips. Remember that we have unverified, often bizarre claims archived by investigation. And it's so interesting that they decided to dump all this stuff into the public for best reasons known to themselves, redacting a lot of stuff. So that in itself makes you wonder, why would they dump this very provocative content and then redact? A. So the mix of fact, allegation, and rumor creates the fog we discussed earlier, where conspiracy myths thrive and accountability blurs. So the Epstein files contains millions of pages, including, like I say, FBI tip line submissions, unverified claims, rumors, anonymous letters, wild theories, investigators archived but never validated. So there's a lot that they archived and made sure they made available, but the challenge we face throughout this whole thing is that a lot of it is not easy to validate. All right. So remember, these are the things that sit squarely in the bizarre conspiracy theory adjacent category. The kind of claims the Department of Justice itself said were untrue and sensationalist. So what I'm about to go into is in that space. So below are 10 of the strangest, most outlandish, and most obviously conspiratorial allegations that appeared in the files or in public speculation and around them, without assessing whether, without asserting that any of them are true. So I'm going to now name the bizarre stuff. So we came from looking at in the previous transmission, if you remember, we looked at 10 key allegations which are actually going in. You haven't missed much, Makani. We're going. So let's look at the bizarre customer. By the way, you know something? I just need to double check because I noticed I'm not getting any comments from Facebook. So if you're on Facebook and you're watching this, please just comment to let me know that you're actually seeing this so that I know if we are on or not. But it looks like we are. But let me know. Just if you're on Facebook, just say anything so that I know we are on. In case we're not, then I'd have to obviously, go over there and do something. So here are 10 bizarre conspiracy theory level claims found in the Epstein family. Great. Rejoice. Kolombota. Thank you, guys. Absolutely. So let's run. Number one. So remember, I've already given enough disclaimers to this, so I'm not here to say these are true. No. Peter Mlamba, good to see you. So this is not me saying these are true. What I'm saying is these are part of the stuff that has been dumped with the current files. So the truth or fakeness of these things remains speculative. But nonetheless, they are mentioned, and I will talk about some of these things. I have my own views, even though they're denied. Caroline, well, good to see you as well. All right, so claims of a global elite breeding program. That's the first one. This is serious. Some tip line submissions alleged Epstein was part of a secret plan to seed humanity with elite DNA, a theory that circulated online for years despite zero evidence. I am also a bit suspicious of that one. I personally wouldn't put my money on that one. I think that's just fake for so many reasons. Why would they want to breed an elite, what do you call it? Hybrid, well, not hybrid, but an elite group of people. Why would they want to breed them? The idea would be to depopulate. In fact, the depopulation agenda for me is far more real than this one about breeding programs. I'll get to that. So that one for me is a nah. Number 2, rumors of an underground temple used for occult rituals. Now, the blue and white structure on Little St. James's sparked wild claims of ritual ceremonies, sacrifices, and coded symbolism, none of which investigators ever substantiated. This one, I think, is true. Why do I say so? Because we've been having these things that come around, these strange occultic behaviors. I would believe anything about these people, no more bosom. I hear you rejoice. I really think there's some truth to this, and I'll tell you why. Because I'm going to give you 2 incidences where you see these weird events and around what should be very elite, very high class, solid places. And why would they have these crazy ceremonies? So the first one was the CERN. You know, CERN is the center for whatever it is. It's French, I don't know how to pronounce it. But CERN is a famous place in, I think it's Switzerland. There is a particle accelerator, the Large Hadron Collider, massive 17-kilometer circumference machine that's used to accelerate particles to near the speed of light and then bombard them in order to replicate conditions that were there in the beginning of time, according to them, during the Big Bang. So this thing, they've spent billions of dollars, in fact, probably heading towards trillions of dollars on this particular machine that replicates the conditions and allows them to crack all these atoms into pieces, study the subatomic particles using very complicated and sophisticated technology. So one of the biggest stories about CERN, which is so interesting, in the conspiracy theory space, is that CERN is actually also creating a portal to open this world into the netherworld, into the ethereal plane or whatever world exists, other dimensions. So some people believe that CERN is a multi-dimensional door-opening stargate that they're trying to create. So now, why am I raising CERN? Because that's, when you look at it from a scientific standpoint, they're just solid science. They're just studying subatomic particles and quantum physics. That's the cover story. But it's interesting that at the entrance of CERN is a statue of the goddess Shiva, god Shiva. I don't know what they are, she or he, I don't know. And this is the goddess Shiva. Now Shiva is known as the destroyer. And she's got the hands and legs and things. This very interesting creature that they put on the cover, on the entrance of this place. A very, very interesting object, and what they have underneath is even weirder. But I'm not talking about CERN today. I want to talk about a ceremony that took place at CERN. I would challenge you guys who are watching right now to go watch the opening ceremony for the same place. It's on YouTube. You just type and say CERN, CERN, opening ceremony, and then watch that ceremony. Oh, I have never seen the amount of dark, satanic, new age symbolism that you see in that video. It's like, what am I watching? It's like the Olympic Games opening for, is it 2020? But there was one where they had the bull, they had all this going on. And I mean, literally they were replicating a ceremony to Mammon. Mammon, Mammon is the god of commerce, and it is represented by the bull. So there's a whole ceremony around that. It's so weird to watch. It's so satanic, in your face. It's only ordinary people who have no clue what's going on, that don't understand the symbolism that was behind that. And I think you saw the other one where they were mocking the Last Supper with transgender people. Like, you ask yourself, why would Olympic people that is about athleticism and all that, why would they bring this really weird, literally borderline demonic, satanic stuff and put it as part of art in the name of an opening ceremony? So you've got the Olympics, you've got the CERN ceremony, then you've got a weird ritual that was recorded on camcorder in front of that same statue where they look like they're carrying out a satanic event. Again, that's real. So type CERN satanic ritual at statue in the night. Just type that in YouTube, you will see the ceremony. And they claim, nah, it was just some pranksters. But, again, so you see, I'm showing you patterns. And then you've got the famous Bohemian Grove event where a secret, I think it was either David Icke or Alex Jones or one of these, conspiracy theory people that went with this hidden camera and filmed a ceremony taking place at the Bohemian Grove that looked 100% like something straight out of Eyes Wide Open, some satanic stuff with the hoodies and the red outfits, and the whole thing just looked weird. And they even had the big statue thing, and all these were bowing. And these are powerful, rich people, not some poor, undersexed, randy old men. No, this was powerful people. And that camera was snacking, and the reporter was in seriously hot soup for having snacked such a camera to film such an event. Now, all these rituals are happening in these high-level places. And do you think it's coincidence? You think it's coincidence that the Epstein would have also something similar that could be tied with all the symbolism and all the things I'm going to show you in my Satanic Awareness Manual later in this series? Because those symbols you see in the Satanic Manual are actually the same symbols that you come across in places like this Epstein place. So the rumors of underground temple used for occult rituals, I'm buying into that. And that I buy into. 3, allegations that Epstein faked his death and escape. So one of the most persistent conspiracy theories, that Epstein was secretly extracted by intelligence agencies and is alive under a new identity. For me, I cannot write that off. Because you see, there are two people that, there are many, but these two who I really do not believe died. Epstein is one of them, and the other one is definitely Osama bin Laden. I do not believe, because you see, the way these guys, especially Osama bin Laden, the amount of hell he raised for the whole world. I mean, he practically was the reason for the Afghanistan, Libya, and Iraq wars. It's Osama bin Laden. Remember, he's purported to have bombed the 2 embassies in Africa, in Kenya and Tanzania. The Kenyan one led to the death of many, many Kenyans and changed the landscape of Nairobi, downtown Nairobi. So with that level of being wanted, and then, they find him, and then they carry out this powerful thing, and then they kill him, and then they ditch his body in the sea, and don't get to see anything. Man. Because you remember that, what's his name? Gaddafi. Gaddafi's body was on display. Saddam Hussein, we watched his execution. It was live on TV. You tell me that the #1 guy, the most wanted man on the planet, Osama bin Laden, is captured and killed secretly and buried in accordance with Muslim rites at sea. Man, that's not me. I don't buy that. So even the Epstein death, for me, same story. Because who saw that? Cameras malfunction, everything goes wrong on that day, and this guy manages to kill himself in the cells, and they carry out his body. Now, I've watched enough movies. We've watched enough movies to know that people like him probably came up with a big deal, and they, just took him away. They whisked him away or whatever. So of course, this is conspiracy theory. Agreed. But for me, I am also among those who do not believe that Epstein died. Nope. I believe they just did some clever stuff and made him disappear. Number 4, claims that Epstein was the Mossad, CIA, MI6, and KGB asset simultaneously. Some submissions insist he was a quadruple agent running a global blackmail operation for every major intelligence service at once. I do not argue against this, and I'll tell you why I don't argue. Because remember that people like Ehud Barak was part of the many big names that were named under this whole setup. And for me, what's even more interesting is that why did he have so many videos and cameras? And does it make sense that in that world, blackmail is the key to getting people to do what you want them to do? I mean, imagine having the influence of being able to get world-level leaders to your home. These are world-level influencers. Get them in your home, tempt them to get them to do crazy stuff, whether it's drugs, whether it's sleeping with underage girls or boys, or even participating in weird rituals. And imagine These are doing this in your safe place, and yet you have secret cameras that get to record everything, and then you use that later to blackmail them. For me, that makes perfect sense, because once you blackmail these leaders, even those who were not supposed to do stuff end up doing it. So when you have an agenda that's been driven by very elite, powerful people, the only way you make sure that everybody toes line with your program is to make sure that you got some dirt on them. And blackmail is the #1 methodology used by all these powerful people to make sure that they have dirt on you, which they can then obviously release as some kind of scandal. So you've noticed in the European and American setup of politics, sexual scandals are they're taken very badly, and many people end up resigning when such things come up. And of course, if you then end up like Prince Andrew with serious cases to answer, where there is probable proof that you dealt with underage girls, that's even worse, because you could end up going to jail for a very, very long time. I mean, if Harvey Weinstein and Bill Cosby found themselves in jail for things they did 35 years ago, what stops anyone from finding themselves in trouble today? So I believe that all these guys being thrown under the buses are part of the system to purge itself. In fact, I'll be very honest with you. I even believe this whole leak is a ruse. I'm going to pause there and say it again. I personally believe that this whole leak, this whole thing about the Epstein files is a ruse, because there's no way at this level they release this level of information and begin a story of this magnitude if there isn't something even bigger they're covering up. So some people think that some people feel that this whole thing with the Epstein files is because circumstances have demanded for it, and we've gotten to a stage where now the truth is going to come out and there's people fighting for justice. I really don't subscribe to that. I'll just be honest with you. I really, like I said last time in my other presentation, there are two laws. There's laws and justice for the rich and elite, and law and justice for the ordinary people. And I believe that's just how the whole thing works. All this thing about justice and what justice being served is nonsense in my books, because when we look at stories of people like the two greatest whistleblowers of all time, and that's Edward Snowden and, was this Snowden or Snowden? I always get his name wrong. So Edward Snowden and Julian Assange. If you look at these two people, do you know the type of data these guys dropped into the world? Crazy level data, to a point where you start asking yourself, were they also part of the setup? Are they being used as a way to kind of work as a decoy or to destabilize an old system to bring a new system? We honestly will never know. Just like these so-called Epstein files. Now, with Snowden and especially Julian Assange, I mean, Julian Assange dropped major stuff. I mean, the whole WikiLeaks thing is proof. There's a lot of things that today would never have known had it not been for people like Julian Assange. And Julian Assange has paid a terrible price for being a whistleblower at that level. We know whistleblowers worldwide don't really get a good deal. So if you become a whistleblower, just know that you're putting yourself at risk to a life of estrangement and torture and pain, and in many instances, death itself. So that's how crazy it is. And Julian Assange is no exception. He really suffered and has continued to suffer for having released all that information. A lot of stuff about the extrajudicial killings by the Americans, the killing of civilians, all that stuff, just the terrible things. The Panam Papers. Anybody who remembers the Panam Papers? Even our own was named in the Panam Papers. Can you imagine? So this whistleblower thing is massive. And for me, I have my suspicions about this whole Epstein file thing. I mean, is this really an accidental thing that's come out because nobody could do anything about it? Or are they stage managing this in order to take us to the next thing and to get us away from focusing on other things? I don't know. We'll soon see. Yes, David, in fact, that's good. In fact, on the death thing, yes, Adolf Hitler is another one. They told us he killed himself in a bunker by committing suicide with his generals, and then, the bunker was blown up or something. We don't know. Anyway, number 5, assertion that world leaders were hypnotized or mind controlled. Interesting one. A handful of letters claimed Epstein used neuro-linguistic programming, NLP, or MK ultra-style techniques to control powerful figures. I wouldn't put that past them. Because if you've watched movies like The Manchurian Candidate, which is based off a book, of course, it's not far-fetched. Did the CIA have programs like MK Ultra to work assets into doing what they wanted? Absolutely, that's real. That's not some exaggeration. But the only issue is how much of that stuff is true. How much do they bring out, and how much is hidden from us? We don't know. What I know for a fact is that this is another area that they have done a lot of work. So mind control is a big deal. And depending on who and how they work with people, this is possible. For me, I don't even think mind control is even a bigger issue. The bigger issue is the blackmail, because isn't blackmail also mind control? I think it is. If you've got dirt on someone and you can use that to get them to do what you want to do, then you're effectively controlling them through the mind, through the fear of scandal. That's it. And especially if it's really juicy, dirty, terrible, wicked stuff. And the one that's a big deal is underage sex. That's a huge deal, which carries massive penalties, because remember, that's pedophilia. And there are people, there is a market out there for pedophiles. There are people who like sleeping with small children. It's a big deal. That's why the whole idea about the Sound of Freedom movie and the trafficking of children, I confirmed $150 billion a year industry. That's a massive industry, my friends, almost matching the gaming industry, which sits at $300 billion. But the movie industry is almost at the same level as the child trafficking industry. Can you imagine? Because the film industry sits at 200 billion dollars. But look at the child trafficking, $150 billion, and that's the one that they have kept track of. What about what we don't know? So it's a really serious issue. We don't know. Number 6, allegations of the secret island tunnel network. Now, rumors describe vast underground chambers, submarine docks, and escape channels beneath Little St. James. None confirmed by any investigations. I also don't know. Maybe it's there, maybe not. Maybe from those temples where they would take people to go and slaughter them and take them through these terrible, terrible ceremonies, which we're not sure of. So that one is a 50-50. So claims of satanic or ritualistic abuse rings. This, I'm not even going to finish reading this. Yes, in my books. Yes. And I'll get to explain. So some submissions echoed 1980s style satanic panic narratives, alleging cult ceremonies, symbols, and ritual abuse, again unverified and often very fantastic. One of the biggest challenges, my dear viewers, is that there's a habit of dropping truth with lots of fantasy. And so the water gets muddied so much that it's very difficult to get to what is actually true. So there's been terrible, terrible stories around this thing about satanic ritual abuse with the children. Lots of children go missing. There's been stories of girls being buried and hidden. There's that famous story I told you in the first transmission that 6 drums of sulfuric acid were purchased, and nobody knows what they were purchased for. So there's a very strong belief that some of these girls, as well as children, we don't have a lot of news on the children. I don't have, not from this particular direction, would be taken to this place and then would be ritually abused and slaughtered in a satanic ritual, in order to draw energy from them or to invoke their satanic powers. But again, this is purely speculative. I mean, we don't have any stories of that per se, but of girls dying. Yeah, there's stories around that some of these girls would die and then they would be hurriedly buried. Because one of the things that would happen is some of these elite, wealthy people would like to have rough sex, and that rough sex included, literally BDSM style sex, which included choking, groping, and beating and all sorts of things. So in the process of taking some of those sexual things, of course, they would end up actually injuring some of these girls, and in some instances they died. So when those girls died, then what would follow would be a serious cover-up. You're like, how do we make sure that we're able to cover this up and keep people safe? So they would do a cover-up as a result of that. So those are the stories that we've heard about, and we're not too sure if they are true or not true, but there is a heavy rumor around that. In fact, there's one video that exists which shows a Google Earth picture of the island, and there's an open ground that looks like, open sand ground. And then 6 months later, that's completely changed. It's got something else on it. So there are some people who believe that that was a place where they would, they buried some of these poor, unfortunate girls, and then kept it secret. And then the rumor has it that when the story of the first arrest came up, and then he ordered those drums, they unearthed those and then dissolved them in acid to make sure that they are not accessible anymore. So we don't know. These are all just speculations, but very, very serious ones. Now the eighth one, which is totally bizarre, I mean, this is just literal fantasy, fantastical nonsense. The Epstein time travel theory. A fringe online group claims Epstein funded research into time manipulation and immortality, linking him to unrelated scientific papers. That stuff is there, but it's obviously nonsense. Number 9, claims that celebrities were cloned on the island. Again, I mean, that's ridiculous. How do you clone celebrities? But there has been very insistent stories around that. I think recently, the most recent one I came across, which is ridiculous but really gained traction online, was Jamie Foxx was cloned or something in those lines. And then speaking of clones, one of the most famous stories around clones is Shine. Those of you who remember the story of Diddy and Shine, there was a murder that took place at a party where you had Tupac and I can't remember who else I can't remember the year. And as they had this altercation, somebody got killed and it became very serious. And I think Shine ended up taking the fall. Now, what's interesting is Shine goes in a gangster and comes out of prison a polished, totally different person, like so different. Shine is now the leading opposition in Belize. It's unreal. You got to look at the old Shine and the new Shine. And I think recently, because of all this PDD stuff, Shine did come out to speak about what happened and his bone of contention with Diddy and what have you. But what's just interesting is the contrast. So there's a whole group of people out there who say that that's not Shine. That's not Shine. That's his clone. They cloned him and it's just somebody else completely. And this cloning story has really been doing the rounds with some of the celebrities and very, very interesting stuff. So Jamie Foxx was the latest one to undergo that story because he had one of those panic attack things, and then he went into hospital, and then he comes out of that hospital thing, and they say he's a different guy. Anyway, I can't say much. And then I think everybody knows Kanye or Ye also has undergone the same thing. They're saying that this Ye that's out now is not the Ye that went in. It's a clone of Ye. But I mean, I don't even know if we really have the technology for cloning yet. Humans, it is a possibility. There could be clandestine underground things going on around that, but we don't know. Like, honesty, we just don't. So, and then number 10, allegations that Epstein possessed a black book of alien contacts. Now that's just ridiculous as well. Honest. One of the strangest submissions claimed that he had connection to extraterrestrial beings and that his wealth came from non-human intelligence. I disagree. So now, Collins Banda here is saying, could it be that they dropped the files on purpose to desensitize the masses on pedophilia? I think so, like they did with the gay agenda. I'm telling you, the whole thing about these files is so weird. I'm telling you, it's so weird. Even the game they played, oh no, they're not real. No, they're not coming out. No, we're going to release them. No, we won't release them. Just the whole game, for me, reeked of theater. And so to this day, even though we're doing this, it's purely just for you to learn some crazy mad stuff. But I really have my suspicions on whether this whole dump is real, generic, organic, truth finding. Smells like a whole agenda to me. So anyway, so why do these matter? Why have I mentioned these? These claims appear in the files because investigators archive. The investigators archive everything, even nonsense. So I think kudos for being so good at that. Bruce Owen says he believes cloning is very possible. I think so. In fact, I mean, Dolly the sheep is proof of cloning. So if Dolly the sheep could be cloned and live for a couple of years, What clandestine underground stuff are they doing right now that they're not divulging to the public? What are they doing behind the scenes, behind closed doors? Those of you who followed the research on stem cell, very, very interesting stuff. They can, with stem cell, they can pretty much create anything. So where do stem cells come from? The zygotes. So once the babies are fused, that first set is where they can actually do everything. They can do quite a bit with that. If you're familiar with IVF, you'll be very amazed how many they can create out of these seeds and things as they pick the potential candidate for implanting. But I won't go there. So I am with you, Bruce. Yeah, high possibility that this is obviously something that happens, the clone. So anyway, they appear in files because investigators archive everything. They show how myth, fear, and power can intersect. And for me, this is one of our biggest challenges. So when I start dealing the topic around psyops or psychological operations, you will see, I will show you, I'll demonstrate to you how powerfully this works, how they use myth, fear, and power. And with that, they can control masses, mass public people. Public opinion, public views can be swayed powerfully using psychological operations. And I'll explain about it so that you understand how it works, but it's very powerful. They reveal the cultural hunger for explanations when institutions fail. So that's another issue. The law enforcement agencies, the news gathering centers haven't done a good job. In fact, it's come to be learned that all these news places are actually, especially legacy media, have agendas. Now, it's not just that they don't have agendas. Everybody's always known that the news gatherers have agendas. In fact, everybody has an agenda. But what makes this a bit sad is not just the fact that there's an agenda, but the fact that it is manipulated to suit a narrative they're pushing out there. And when I get to the psyops part of my presentation, I will show you about 18 different psychological operations. Why am I showing all those? Because I want to show you how psyops is the new age mind control. It's new age witchcraft and mind control, and how you can manipulate entire populations into thinking in a particular way. It's scary. And one of the scary things about psychological operations or psyops is that we have no capacity to stop them. We can't even see them. We can't even recognize them. They are so powerful that even I, who is teaching you these things, is and can be a victim of the psychological operation like that. We have no antivirus of the mind to stop us from becoming victims or becoming recipients and programmed individuals of the psychological operation. That's how powerful they are. So one can be carried out. Even right now, there are psychological operations going on by the establishment to hoodwink the public at various levels. Even in Africa, we've been victims of psychological operations for the longest of times, and I'll show you. But let's continue. So there is a hunger for explanation. So when the authorities do not give adequate explanations in a clear, concise, and factual manner, it opens the door to speculation. Okay, so that's what happens. We end up now open to all manner of. So that's how rumor mongering starts, because rumor mongering is the same thing. If you don't give factual, proper information, people will speculate. That's why it's so important. So, but what these guys have done, they are very clever. They have learned how to manage information, and they have mastered the art of managing information. I call it the art of deception. I have a whole presentation on that, but I'm not going to go into it with this Epstein file thing. But just know that they have a whole strategy around the art of deception. And in the art of deception, the three major tools is disinformation, misinformation, and what's that word? So disinformation, misinformation, and what's the third one? Detraction. Yes, detraction or decoy, or what we call misdirection. So misdirection is very powerful, and they do this very, very well. So they are brilliant at this, and so they control the masses. Even now, I can tell you, most of us watching this, you consider yourself fairly alert and awakened. I assure you there is a psyop going on right now, which you have bought hook, nail, and sinker, even I. We are all victims of this. And the only time we're helped a bit is when we become aware and go, oh my God, is that what that is? Because, once you're just given the alert and then you wake up and realize, okay, then you become awake. But even when you become awake, it's very difficult to awaken the masses because the masses are under a serious spell. So I will be breaking this down properly. So anyway, number 4, demonstrate. Is that number 4? Yeah. Demonstrate how real crimes get buried under fantastical noise. This is another powerful thing. So were there crimes going on at Epstein Island or St. James or whatever they call it? Yes. That's why Ghislaine Maxwell's in jail. That's why, what's his name? Epstein was in jail. He was actually in jail when he, quote unquote, unalived himself. Okay. So that tells you, every one of you watching today, it tells you that this whole system can be well manipulated depending on the level of interest going up. That's why, there's a level which I must honestly say that justice ceases to work. And that's just a fact. Justice ceases to work because at that level, you just don't get justice. And I always like to cite our own example in Zambia because for me, that helps to put things into perspective. And I'll say it again. Today I'll give another example again because I gave it before. Everybody knows about Sierra 1. What many people don't know is that Sierra 1 was accused of child defilement. So Sierra 1 and his brother, so that's Andrew and his brother, Andrew Jumadu, and his brother were involved in a case in Zambia where a youngster, a minor, was repeatedly raped, abused sexually by the two of them for a period of time. And then when this case became open, there was enough evidence gathered by some of the people in the system to make sure that Andrew and his brother brought to book. They were arrested, the case did begin, but somewhere along the way, the child was threatened and the case was withdrawn. I mean, the child was withdrawn as a star witness. And because she withdrew, the whole case could not go or move in any way. And so they had to dispose of the case. Those guys went scot-free. Word has it that it is because of that someone, it is believed it is Madam Reverend Sumaili, we can't confirm that, all speculation, went with this information and got it to the president then, Dr. Chagwalungu, who when he learned about what had happened and the lack of justice, he's the one that placed the order to say, can you get that man and deport him now? And so that in itself, that itself meant that there was no longer anybody that could cover for him because Siawan was a very smart man. He had made sure he made connections with all leading influential people. He was hosting his lunchtime fellowship meetings at service headquarters conference room upstairs and the Ministry of Defense conference room. So some of the big wigs would come in and be part of his meetings. And of course, through that, he connected to ministers and powerful people within the government whom he was giving, as he said, do as I say. He was giving them power for their success. So this guy had embedded himself very powerfully in the corridors of power. And nothing would have happened to him had it not been that Madam Sumaili and whoever took this information directly to President Lungu, who at the time he had not yet influenced. And that's how he was able to get that information to him. And when he learned of that, he had him deported unceremoniously. That explains why Sierra One became so pissed off with this former government and made it a crusade to see their end. So it's not that he has this justice and love for Zambia, total rubbish. It's purely just a revenge ploy. So that, my friends, is why I say that law enforcement and their wings can sometimes be super, super slow when it comes to dealing with cases. And that's why we have such issues. So what am I saying? I'm saying basically they are not evidence. They are artifacts of a society trying to make sense of something deeply disturbing. So when you go back to Epstein, that's what is happening. They are trying to make sense. Bruce Owen says, Zambia's no, he's not. He's nowhere. He doesn't have the money. He doesn't have. Can't even compare. So now, in closing this presentation today, I want to take you guys to something very, very interesting. I want to show you, or I want us to analyze why So here's the question. Let me just ask this question because I'm trying to explain and I'm not explaining it properly. So why do conspiracy myths so often end up protecting the very people they claim to expose? Why do we have these conspiracy myths? Why would they dump all this fake stuff into the public information? What's the aim behind that? So I'm going to use this now moment, this last part of my presentation, to give you a narrative analysis, how conspiracy myths actually protect the powerful. Here's why conspiracy theories are such fodder for the wealthy. And what they do is they always make sure that when people are coming close to the truth, they would dump a lot of fake stuff along with the truth so that the average person like you and me get distracted and say, oh, you see, so rubbish. And that's how we give it up. But I mean, look at the most interesting conspiracy theory of all time. Think about it. What is the most powerful conspiracy theory of all time? A lot of people think it's the assassination of JFK. No, in my opinion, the most enduring conspiracy theory of all time is about so-called aliens and the UFO. For me, that's the most enduring conspiracy of all time. The average person out there thinks that UFOs and flying saucers and aliens and whatever is all just science fiction from Hollywood. That's what the average person thinks, which could not be further from the truth. I mean, recently, amazingly, I don't know if it slipped out of his mouth by accident, but Obama actually admitted accidentally in an interview, aliens real? He said, actually, and then he said it, and then he had to, like after 2 days when the backlash went out there, because, everybody was like, oh my God, the former president just admitted. And I mean, Trump was even asked, Trump, what do you have to say? Obama just admitted about aliens. And, Trump was also very evasive about how he answers. And then what does he do later now? With all this Epstein, pressure, then now all of a sudden, Trump wakes up and says, well, I'm instructing the powers that be to bring out all information there is to bring out and do a full disclosure on aliens. Now, those of us who follow these things are very amused because first, for people like me, nothing new. These aliens have been around since Roswell in 1947, if you like. Something did happen in Roswell, New Mexico, and not just Roswell. There's been event after event after event. Project Bluebeam did a full 12,000 case investigation for 10 years. And in those 12,000 cases, there's over 5% of cases that are inexplicable. So meaning about 500, maybe 700 cases, which you could not ignore, which were not just weather balloons or mental delusion or whatever. These needed further information. But what happened? It was all covered up. So in 2017, there was the disclosure program, which started the disclosure congressional hearing process with Avenat Dr. Stephen Greer and all these experts and Stanton Friedman and everybody anybody in the community of UFOs and all that expertise. Sorry, my image is frozen, so hold on. I can't proceed. Somebody confirm if you can actually see me or not, because my image is frozen. So I'm just wondering if I'm still okay. Wait. All right, so I think I'm back. Yes, I am. Okay, yeah. So the image of frozen a bit there, so I don't know what was going on. So there's been these stories around that and disclosure. To be honest, even when government took it on and began to do these great investigations in the U.S., a lot of information still was very evasive. I mean, the Department of Defense in America did release some teasers. I call them teasers. Captured UFO images flying around and whatever. And they were very, very interesting to look at. Like, oh, okay. I mean, like the latest one, which really blew everybody's mind away, is when a missile hits into an object and literally bounces off that thing, like as if the object doesn't even get affected. This object is moving across the water at super speed. No human propulsion system can move at that speed. And it crisscrosses with a missile. Missile knocks it and goes off, and nothing happens to the object. So that was a huge reveal in recent times, maybe about a year ago. These guys have been dropping this piecemeal stuff. Then the Minister of Defense comes in 1 minute and says, I mean, the Department of Defense, sorry. They come in 1 minute and they say, Well, there is stuff, and then they release this 1,500 page document thing, and everybody's freaking out about that. And then they come later and say, "Nah, it's not real." And then now you got the president coming and saying, "Oh well, we're gonna have to do a release." And then Obama is like, "Yes, they're real," and then the whole thing. And yet the average Zambian thinks this is a joke. Guys, there's something massive going on. And now, why do these conspiracy theories protect the powerful? How and why do they do so? So this is what I want to now present. I just brought in that as an example to show you how powerful the whole thing is. I mean, Disclosure Day is a movie coming out on the 6th of June, 2026 by Steven Spielberg. Check out the trailers. They look really freaky. And then Donald Trump is talking about disclosure. There's the disclosure of congressional hearings that have been going on for a while. I tell you guys, as far as I'm concerned, something massive is cooking. Something massive is cooking. If indeed they're going to decide to reveal these so-called aliens, we should be in for some very interesting times. I personally subscribe to the fact that they're not aliens, they are fallen angels, 100%. No story about aliens. That alien story is a cover. So anyway, woke up. So they're extraterrestrials, they're not aliens. Now let's go into the narrative. So how conspiracy myths protect the powerful? So conspiracy theories often present themselves as weapons of truth. But in practice, they function like smoke grenades. Okay, thrown into the public square, they blind the crowd while the real actors slip quietly into the shadows. So the Epstein saga is a textbook example of this dynamic. So let me now give you the 10 characteristics that make this so powerful. Why the elite uses to scam the entire public. And you and I are none the wiser. The only difference in you and me is I do not trust anything that comes out of any news media by anybody. Because I always ask myself the one simple question: what's the benefit? What do they stand to benefit from this? And once you start digging that deep, you do find the real reasons. So let's go into the 10 reasons. These are the 10, let me read it again. How conspiracy myths protect the powerful. So 10 ways in which conspiracy myths protect the powerful. So number 1, the avalanche principle. Bury the signal under noise. So when a scandal involves elites, the volume of information becomes a weapon. So millions of pages, thousands of names, hundreds of rumors. So what does that do? The public becomes overwhelmed by the data. Okay, and so the truth becomes indistinguishable from speculation, and the powerful benefit from the confusion. So noise protects power. Just take that away. Say, noise protects power. Independence Day is taking or loading. I agree. So noise protects power. So the avalanche principle, bury the signal under noise. So just give so much data that people cannot figure out the truth from the noise. And so in the process, the truth remains covered. That's method number 1, very effective. And many times when you follow a lot of these leads, they go nowhere. So they are literally red herrings. And it's a very powerful way to protect the elite. So they just take the truth and just overwhelm it with a lot of lies. And so anybody trying to follow each thread, it goes nowhere. And they're very, very good at doing this. They do it so well that the average person gets overwhelmed by the nonsense. Not to mention the fact that people start coming up and saying, if there used to be a newspaper back in the day called the News of the World. It was ridiculous, ridiculously funny. Elvis Presley is an alien. My 3 babies are alien, are star child children. Whatever. Total lies. So number 2. So that was number 1. Number 2. The mythic distraction. Remember, I told you in the art of deception, distraction. So in magic, it's called the prestige. It's when the magician misdirects you by focusing your attention on something, and whilst you look that way, he is doing something this way. And it's a very, very effective way of misdirection. So the mythic distraction, replace the mundane with the fantastical. So real abuse is horrifying, but it is also depressingly ordinary. So therefore, grooming, coercion, manipulation, institutional failure. So conspiracy myths replace that with secret temples, occult rituals, cloning labs, intelligence agencies, super spies, and underground tunnels. So they take the ordinary and turn it into the extraordinary and make it so fantastic and so unreal the less the public focuses on the actual prosecutable crimes. See that? So what are we saying? Myth replaces accountability. So people like the juicy mythical stories of Satanism. The problem is that is mighty difficult to prove. Which is easier to prove? Underage sex. Simple. So, but then if you muddy the whole story with all these things about Satanists and all sorts of things and time traveling, what does that do? It replaces accountability. So it's a very powerful way of keeping themselves from being accountable. Number 3, the everyone is guilty effect. Okay, so when conspiracy narratives accuse everyone, politicians, celebrities, billionaires, royals, tech founders, the result is paradoxical. If everyone is guilty, then no one is guilty. The public ends up shrugging, the powerful breathe easier, the victims are drowned out. Universal suspicion becomes universal immunity. So we know very well that not everybody is guilty. There are people that just happen to have taken a picture with Epstein, happen to have been on that flight innocently to go wherever, Now, the problem is that if everybody is now made to look guilty, what does that do? It covers up the actual criminals. And that's what has gotten these guys to get away with everything for a long time. So one of the secrets is this, that universal suspicion becomes universal immunity. Why? Because of the everyone is guilty effect. It doesn't work. It actually messes the whole thing up. And that's why the conspiracy, the public, the elitists love to do this. They love to throw these breadcrumbs all over the place, and people get so confused and so overwhelmed, they miss the real picture. Number 4, the red herring of the impossible plot. Okay? So where are we? The more elaborate the conspiracy, the more impossible it becomes to prove. And that is precisely the point. If the public is chasing Mossad, CIA, MI6 super operations, satanic cults, time travel experiments, global breeding programs, then no one is asking the simple, devastating questions. And here are the questions from. 1, who enables this? Who ignored the victims? 3, who funded it? And 4, who protected Epstein? So complexity becomes a shield. And that, my friends, for me, that's it. So what you do, you get people, send a few red herrings and to my little crumbs and your breadcrumb trails and things like that. And then people chase after all sorts of things, and they are missing the bigger question about who are the enablers, because they are so focused on this massive conspiracy of gargantuan proportions. Let me be very honest with you. I heard something in the movie, the Jim Garrison movie, JFK. You know, the Oliver Stone movie with Jim Garrison, the investigator. There's something very powerful that Jim Garrison and his colleagues were talking about, and they were saying the idea that a conspiracy can be done so well and so well covered up that no one can get to the truth is in and of itself a false flag. Why? Because then he said, if the best secret is the one done by one person and never told to anyone else. And then they made a statement, look, if 3 of us can have a secret and we can't even keep it between the 3 of us, but one will go and whisper it, how do you have a secret that's being run by tens of thousands of people, maybe even hundreds? This is the reason why the moon landing thing being fake is laughable. Because if just 3, 4 people cannot keep a secret, a lie, because so there's a lie, and now there's 4 of you who know the truth, or 3 of you. What the usual rule is in the dark world is you kill everybody and you shoot yourself. I know that sounds funny, but yeah, you kill everyone and shoot yourself. And then that way that secret goes to the grave. Nobody will know about what happened because no one is sitting with that secret. But the more people you bring in, someone somewhere is going to talk. And usually it's deathbed confessions, things that's where people come and say, no, actually, the truth. And then they'll say it. And then sooner or later, that truth will be everywhere. And that's why the moon landing is fake story, doesn't add up, because pure logic dictates that the more people are in, the more likely that thing is going to spread out there. It's not going to stay a secret. So if they did not land on the moon, and they had over 30 at one point, NASA and its different agencies and organizations across the world had over 30,000 people working on the Apollo program. And the Apollo program, remember, had 13 rockets that went to the moon. I think 13 or 14, I can't remember. But I don't know, but I know there were more than 13 Apollo programs. So all that was fake. You know, it's ridiculous. It just wasn't, because you cannot keep a secret that well. And the enemies of the United States, like Russia, were also racing for the moon. So they too were monitoring in every way the KGB can monitor. So if they didn't land, believe me, Russia would have been the first country to bring out the evidence to show the Americans have lied. So the story about Stanley Kubrick and what you call them, what are they called? The studio landing and what all that stuff they talk about, it doesn't hold up to just simple, plain logic. And that's why I love these questions. Who enabled this? What? The whole Epstein thing. Who ignored the victims? Why were victims ignored for years? Why? And then who funded Epstein? Where's the money? What's the paper trail? And who protected Epstein? Who's still protecting him? That will bring you closer to the truth than all these fantastic stories. And that's why moon landing being fake, fantastic story. Because the easier truth is, do we just ask the simple questions? Can you get 30,000 people to die with a secret? Can your secret be so elaborate that even the Russians are fooled? And what about all the moonstones across the earth that were brought back and studied and exist right now in various museums across the world as evidence? Moon rocks, they're there. So you realize that the whole story doesn't add up. And that's why, you know, the simpler truth is the establishment are the ones correct. The establishments are the ones who did what? Who enabled him to run that program, who ignored the victims because they were able to get to anybody that matters and shut them and shut off the cases. And they funded Epstein in the billions and they protected him. In fact, rumor has it, all of us believe, he's chilling somewhere sipping on pina coladas in Bora Bora or somewhere in Israel or wherever he is, but he's definitely there. Okay, so we continue. So complexity becomes a shield. I would have answered you, Jolwe, why hasn't the moon landing been repeated? Simple answer, commercially unviable. Simple. Because as the time proceeded, it was no longer about national pride. When JFK made his speech, we must land a man on the moon by the end of the century and bring him back home safely. It was a national pride thing. Russia and America were competing. Do you know how much money was poured into the Apollo programs by the United States government? You may not know the figure, but I do. $30 billion. $30 billion. That's a lot of money by any standards. Once they had achieved their objective of going to the moon and there was no, commercial viability for going to the moon, why go back? That's why the whole program just died, because there was nothing of commercial value of going to the moon except pride. That's all. So that's the reason that program was dropped. It was too expensive. So it didn't make any sense to continue sending people to the moon. To do what? To pick up rocks and bounce around the rock and come back, and there's nothing going on at the moon. So the whole thing didn't make any more sense commercially, and that's why they dropped it. And so why are they going back now? Because I guess the whole thing of going to Mars is now of interest. So they need to see how are they going to pull off the whole Mars thing, and how are they going to do the colonizing of the moon, and is there any... The truth of the matter is that the only reason they'll ever go to the moon is when there's a commercial purpose. But I digress. So where were we? Number 4, the red herring of the impossible plot. Complexity becomes a shield. Number 5, the psychological comfort of the grand narrative. I like that one. Okay, people prefer grand cosmic explanation to the bleak truth. The truth is so bleak and so boring that we need something exciting with some juice and steak on it. You know what I mean? So here's the truth that people don't like. Institutions fail. Prosecutors cut deals, and in the Epstein case, we saw it firsthand. Rich men exploit power. That's a fact. And bureaucrats collapse. So, Conspiracy Myths offers a story So in the story, what have you have? You have the villain, you have the evil guy, you have the plot, you have the hidden order, and it is an emotional, satisfying story, even if it's false. It just satisfies our, yeah, that makes sense, you know. So, and while the public debates aliens and tunnels, the powerful quietly reorganize their reputations. So comfort replaces justice. That's the fifth reason why the psychological comfort of the grand narrative is more readily acceptable than the simple truth. So no one wants a simple truth. They want very, very complicated stories. That's the reason why the fake papas in Africa are making a killing. That's the reason why religion, and I speak this as a reverend, I'm very, very careful when I say these things, but I mean it. That's the reason religion in Africa is huge business. You know why it's huge business? Because it is better to be told there's a witch in your family and there's a demon that has been troubling your family since the 1700s when your grandfather went and, you know, made the pact with some shrine and altar, and now it's been traveling in your family line and all of you are suffering. All of you are suffering. We must fight this demon. We must fight this. That stuff sounds so nice. When the truth is, you're disorganized, you're ignorant, you're uneducated, you're not hardworking, you're lazy, and you are a victim-minded person. This is the reality. Victim mindset, lazy, ignorant, superstitious, and just plain victim. These are the reasons you're suffering. Nothing to do with some demon and witch. Yes, are there demons and are there witches and is there? Yes. I mean, I subscribe to the whole deliverance ministry, but not at the level we see it in Africa. This nonsense we see, most of it are just frustrated individuals looking for an excuse. The psychological comfort of the grand narrative. There is a witch in my family. The psychological comfort of the grand narrative. There's an uncle or a father or a cousin who is causing all the problems in my life. They have sent hexes. They are sending curses. And you know, and the part that always amuses me about this, and that's what I'm talking about, the reason why I get so amused about this is because, ask yourself a question. If you call on the name of Jesus, which is more powerful than any name in the world, and if Jesus operates from a place of the finished work of the cross, what the hell is a witch doctor doing, bringing problems in your life? Where's the power of the cross? So you see, so for people like me who understand these things, we investigate. That's why when people come with issues, you investigate. I can tell you there's a lot of people right now who are accused of being demon possessed when they're actually suffering the effects of psychological trauma from childhood pain. Simple. So they open certain doors, they have split personalities. There's a psychological explanation to what they're going through. But no, it's an uncle, it's a grandfather. Oh, God forbid. And these are the people. This is why senility, Alzheimer's, and dementia is not understood in Africa. Those poor old people walking around naked, being stoned to death as witches, are probably suffering. I can bet you 95% of those people are suffering from what? From senility, dementia, or Alzheimer's. And that's why they can't answer. That's why they look dazed. They walked out of their homes and nobody saw them, and now they were found there in their nightdress that, you know, she was a witch flying. Are there witches who fly? Of course they are. But I can tell you, 95% are just people that are sick. But because the psychological comfort of the grand narrative is so exciting, this is what most people do. They'll say, it's a witch. It's my grandfather. It's my father. And you see, the papas know this so well. So what do? That's why they entertain you with those stupid conversations with demons. Who talks to demons who are children of the father of lies? You're asking a liar, a certified liar, to talk to you. And you even believe what the liar says? That's the part that just blows my mind. And people watching this stuff, this channel is on the whole day, the whole night. They just, oh my God, did you see that demon? Did you hear that demon say that demon is a liar, certified? Jesus even said, John 8:44, you are like the liar, that your father, the devil, who was a liar from the very beginning. Those demons are the spawn of fallen angels who are all master liars and manipulators. So whatever information they're telling you on that so-called microphone, in that so-called deliverance service, is lies from A to Z. In the words of Kaunda, they lie in the morning, they lie at lunchtime, they lie in the evening, and even in the night, they lie. And then you're like, oh, sure, I think it's my father. But I'm the father. I'm the father. I hate this person. This person. You are a man of God. And the man of God is being nonsense, guys. You know, so it's so interesting in this narrative about the psychological comfort of grand narratives. Even though we laugh about the African church and its ridiculous shenanigans, this is also true at that level. Because a lot of people don't want to admit the truth, that it's failure on the part of the system. They would rather go with the grand tale of a villain, a plot, a hidden order, and some grand plan to take over everybody. So that's more acceptable. That's more exciting. People would rather believe that. So comfort replaces justice. Deal with the real issue and you solve the problem. In Africa, we have our papas. They are riding off this and making a killing. Okay? They're making a killing. They're making such, they're having a field day because of this. So we go to number 6. I should try and finish this quickly. The weaponization of unverified claims. Very, very powerful. So when unverified allegations appear in official files, they create a fog of uncertainty. That's why conspiracy theorists love that. The powerful can say, it's all lies. Look at the crazy stuff in there. They're talking about eating babies. You know, nothing in these files can be trusted. So by mixing truth with absurdity, like I keep saying, the entire archive becomes discredited. So doubt becomes a defensive fortress. That's the reason. That's the 6th reason why conspiracies are favored immensely. Number 7, the scapegoat mechanism. Okay, so conspiracy myths often elevate one or two figures into demonic caricatures. Trump is a good example. Okay, so this allows the system to sacrifice a few individuals while preserving the structure that enabled them. So in this case now with Epstein, who are the demonic entities? 1, Epstein himself. 2, Ghislaine Maxwell. 3, Prince Andrew, and a few others will be thrown under the bus very soon. So in the past we've had Harvey Weinstein, we've had Bill Cosby, we've had R. Kelly, we've had P. Diddy. Very interesting. These are very powerful people connected to very powerful people wielding very powerful influence. So these have been thrown under the bus. So what happens? So they become the scapegoat. I call them the wicker man, the what's the other word? The fall guy. So you throw a few people under the bus. I think right now the former Norwegian Prime Minister is also in hot soup. So they're going to throw a few guys under the bus. You'll see that. So what does that do? It allows the system to sacrifice a few individuals while preserving the structure. So the structure that enabled these people to do all these things, has that been touched? No. So what happens? The public gets catharsis, they get their blood, and then the system remains intact. So a scapegoat is cheaper than reform. So imagine reforming the whole system that creates these monsters. It can't happen. So rather throw a few people under the bus and let them be run over. And in that way, they get called the demon. They get called the bad guy. And then the system remains. I mean, one of my favorite movies, although it's got a lot of cuss words, I think it still holds the record for the highest number of cuss words in one movie. In fact, I remember when we used to buy those DVDs with commentaries, they had something called the F-meter, just to count the number of F-bombs that are done in that movie. And I think there must have been like 700. I don't know, I can't remember the figure, but it was very high. And the movie is Scarface. Now, Scarface, Al Pacino, one of the best gangster movies out there, besides the swear words. One of the most interesting things about Scarface, there's a part that he's having dinner at a restaurant with his wife, and he's super drunk, super high, and no one can tell him anything because he's what was his name? Tony Montana. I'm Tony Montana. Tony Montana. Him. He was Tony Montana from Cuba. I'm a legal immigrant in the United States. Now I had to come to eat my pie. That's the guy. So in that movie, He's in there having his drink, he's super drunk, he's making noise, the whole restaurant is uncomfortable, and then he makes a speech. Very interesting speech. In that speech, he says, I'll paraphrase because I can't quote him word for it because of the F-bombs. But basically, he said, you better take a good look at me because I'm the bad guy. And you know what? It comforts you as society to brand me a bad guy. But that's okay. That's okay. I don't mind being the bad guy. So take a good look at me because you'll never see a bad guy like me. Okay? You'll never see another bad guy like me. Nice quote, Kalumba. I don't break my word for anybody. When I say I have you, I have you. Great movie. So that's a great quotation because that's exactly what it is. You see, the system that creates people like Tony Montana exists to this day. You see, Tony Montana, or now they've got Nicolas Maduro, you know, the Venezuelan president. Yeah, those people are created by a system. But Maduro didn't become who he became just by himself. There's a whole system that's actually supporting such people. In fact, word has it that some of the big drug lords and kingpins in South America were creations funded and supported by the CIA in their clandestine operations to destabilize governments. This is stuff in, what's that book? There's a very good book by John Perkins. I don't know what it's called. The name is gone. If you remember the John Perkins book, somebody type it down, please. Very, very good book. The name is gone. Great book. So in that book, he talks about these strategies used by CIA and them, where it's not a full-out war, but they would sponsor insurrection within governments, and he would be sent as one of the first people to go and plant all these economic strategies to destabilize the entire country. And if those people don't yield, then they now sponsor insurrection and civil unrest from within the country, and many times that would include even funding drug kingpins. In the Middle East, everybody who's followed the history knows that ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and what was the other one from the past? The one that Osama bin Laden didn't, I think it's Al-Qaeda. Those were the work of the CIA to destabilize specific regimes in the Middle East. So we know that this is a strategy that's used by the system. So even that scapegoat, it's easy just to identify someone, let them fall for it, and let them be thrown under the bus. The public gets their catharsis, they get their relief, like, yeah, justice, when the system remains intact. In fact, I dare say that even in this country, that's our problem. What do I mean? We talk about the fight against corruption, but how many of you get caught by cops on the roads? How many of you actually pay the actual guy, the 600, and go to Civic Center to do the whole fast track thing? How many of you actually do that? Me, I'm not even going to lie. I'm not going to sit here on this transmission and claim to be innocent. You know, you look at the convenience of just giving this man 100 kwacha versus going to Civic Center, fighting there the whole day and losing your entire day dealing with a fine. And you still have to go and do your musonko and whatever it is that they nabbed you from the road. I mean, the system is bad. Most people, me inclusive, will just give the man 100 kwacha, say sorry, and it ends there. And they'll tell you, go ahead, make sure you put, yes, I'm putting. You've been going to the insurance. I don't know that, the road tax and everything. Most people do that. If you're going to come on this platform and tell me it's not true, you're just lying. So what's the problem? The problem isn't the policeman getting the bribe. The problem isn't that civil servant asking for a kickback. The problem is the system. So, but you see, the challenge is we don't deal with the system. So you'd rather lock up, what's his name? A few of these guys, Malanje and Bowman Musambo and a few others. The public are like, yeah, we got our pint of blood. But no, we didn't deal with the system. So what's going to happen is when this is over, we're going to have a new batch of Malanges and what's his name? Bowman Musambos going to jail also for corruption cases when this administration goes. I assure you that's going to happen. I guarantee it's going to happen. So we're dealing with a rotten system. So the system must be dealt with. But the scapegoat mechanism works all the time. Because all you need to do is just throw a few people in the eyes of the public, they become the scapegoats. The public is happy here. They are fighting corruption. Everybody looks good. They can sign on their CVs that will recover this and recover that. Yet the system is rotten. So that's the seventh reason why conspiracy works wonderfully for the powerful. Number 8, the infinite loop of we'll never know. We'll never know. Conspiracy myths create a permanent fog. Conflicting stories, contradictory timelines, missing footage, redacted documents, especially redacted documents in the Epstein files. And this leads to a cultural resignation of, since we can't know the truth, why bother? So the powerful thrive in ambiguity. And so therefore, ambiguity is the enemy of justice. And this has worked for years. That's what happens. So nobody can get the proper story. Number 9, the theological dimension, darkness loves confusion. So scripture repeatedly frames evil as something that thrives in secrecy, confusion, misdirection, and half-truths. So conspiracy myths create exactly that environment. They mimic revelation while actually deepening the darkness. So false light is more dangerous than darkness. And you know what? That's also another reason why here in Africa, these churches are popular, because they do the same thing. They love confusion. You know, you need to come for 10 days of prayers. What are you praying for 10 days for? No, just to deal with the ancestors. You know, I'll tell you something. The real power of Jesus is in Jesus. It's not in us fighting ancestors. We have no power to do that. We can fast and pray, yes, and contend. But it's not what they make it out to be. They, you know, some people have been stuck in deliverance for years, you know, because they are so confused. Like I say, secrecy, confusion, misdirection, and half-truths. And they know that when you give these half-truths to people, they get so confused. You know, I heard a prophecy the other day. One of these prophets was telling someone, you know, are there, you know, is there such and such a person in your family? Yes. Even laughs. That's why you're going through what you're going through. Yes, Papa. You're going through what you're going through because there are people in your family that don't like you. True or not true? I mean, they take you around these nonsensical psychological circles that get totally thrown off. And that's why they thrive. False light is more dangerous than darkness. That's what's going on with this particular one. So here in Africa, we thrive on this. And this is also the same reason that the conspiracy theories and the Epstein stuff thrives. Number 10, finally. The final trick, turning the scandal into entertainment. And for me, this is so powerful. You see, once a scandal becomes a meme, a joke, a TikTok trend, or a conspiracy rabbit hole, it loses moral weight. The powerful know this. If the public is entertained, they are no longer outraged. Therefore, spectacle replaces justice. So once it's entertainment, it loses the power. This is the reason why even our papas here in Africa have gotten away, because they turn these things into entertainment. And the sad part is they're real human beings who are suffering because of all these lies. In America, out there with other, what are they called? You know, Epstein. That's what they're doing. They turn it into entertainment and it loses its novelty. It no longer has the power to cause shock that leads to indignation and dealing with the issue. No, it becomes entertainment. So, in closing, the core insight for you guys is this. Conspiracy myths do not expose power, they camouflage the power. They create confusion instead of clarity. That's the big one. Spectacle instead of scrutiny. Fantasy instead of accountability, and noise instead of truth. And in that fog, in that smoke grenade, the powerful walk away untouched. Untouched. And you know what? I'm telling you, let's keep watching this thing, but they will have a few scapegoats they'll throw under the bus, but the systems that run this are going to remain running it, and there will be nothing you or I can do. So let's watch and see what I tell you. And so, in my next transmission, I am going to take you through another very eye-opening presentation called The Power of PsyOps, how the powerful misdirect using modern sorcery, which is known as what? Mind control. So we call this the New Age mind control or New Age witchcraft, which is psychological operations. And they are very powerful. I'm going to show you these things, and they're very heartbreaking because it really shows you how we can be so easily manipulated as the public. And I've put myself there as a we, because even I know for a fact that certain levels of this manipulation is so powerful that we can't even escape it. We get manipulated every minute that we're on this earth. Even now, we're being manipulated. So in my next one, I'm going to show you how they've been running PSYOPs since the Mockingbird, since Operation Mockingbird, because that was the first PSYOP. So I'm going to give you a bit of a background behind what a psychological operation is and then how it works. Then I'm going to give you 18 examples. So it will be quite an extensive presentation. I am of the view that this whole Epstein files, disclosure, aliens, and even Gaza and the Palestine situation with the Israelites is all part of this. Okay? There you go. And I agree with you, Rejoice. Ghislaine will be free or protected. The files will be forgotten and will be given something else to talk about. Yes, the aliens. That's what they're working on, the aliens and the big disclosure. And notice something very interesting. Whilst we're focused on these Epstein files, anybody following what's going on in Palestine, in Gaza? Is anybody following there? No, nobody's following what's going on over there. And that's what shows you just how dangerous this whole operation is. Is anybody following what's going on in the Ukraine with the war? No one's following what's going on over there. People are being slaughtered and killed. Our own Africans are being cheated to go join war, to go join the army in Russia, and then they're sent to the front lines to die like pigs. These are the stories going on. Are you hearing anything in the news? No. We're all talking about Epstein. And from Epstein, we'll move to the disclosure, the aliens. And meantime, Palestine continues. Well, not Palestine, but Gaza continues. The West Bank continues to suffer. And whatever's going on over there continues to go on. Anyway, so I have come to the end of my presentation today. So next presentation, this is what? Tuesday. Next presentation will probably be Friday. Yes, because Thursday I have an engagement. So Friday will be the next presentation. We'll be looking at the power of PSYOPs. Guys, you don't want to miss this one. This is going to open your eyes in ways you cannot believe. Has Africa been a victim of PSYOPs? Major PSYOPs. I will show you also how we have suffered as a continent in this day and age, not even in the past, right now. So take care. So all the best and have a good one. And remember to share this, to tag people, and just get the word out there. I will be doing my usual AI created clips, which will be available for you to follow as well. Take care. God bless. Cheerio, guys. Catch you on Friday.